Yeah, so the story that has been fascinating me has been this whole story around WeWork as the company, and it's kind of a crazy story. I can see the novel on the way, I can see the movie on the way, I can see all of the stuff on the way about how crazy a story it is.
Yeah.
So let me try and give some context, then we can discuss it, Chad. So WeWork is a giant company based out of New York, and what they do is they do co-working, right? So they offer space as a service, as they like to call it. And you can go and rent one desk or two desks or 80 desks, and you can flex up and down on a monthly basis. And basically, they take away the pain of having to have your own office space, your own lease, your own building, etc., and let you rent from them on a monthly basis, right? So it's a fascinating company. A company that's done very, very well, supposedly very, very well, grown incredibly fast over the last few years, and has become a giant behemoth all around the world. In fact, they just opened their first 2 locations in South Africa this year. Right. So they are growing as fast as they can, and they've got a few hundred locations. They've got thousands and thousands of people working in their space. And were seen as a very, very strong company, a typical Silicon Valley Uber-type company where they try and scale and grow as fast as possible. Right. We came to sort of mid-2019, and they decided, cool, we need to take some money off the table, and they started looking at an IPO in the States.
Yep. And
like Chad, you'll know, once you start looking for an IPO, you have to start releasing information that was previously private and previously just for the investors themselves. And all of a sudden, when they started releasing financial information, they started releasing information to the public to start preparing for this IPO. All of a sudden, a lot of the skeletons in the closet came out, and it was clear that the business was not as strong as we once thought, right? It was that typical Silicon Valley model where they were losing hundreds of millions of dollars every single quarter.
Insane.
Trying to scale as fast as they could. And had huge demand, had lots of people in their offices, but were losing money on every single location. So the per unit economics just weren't working. And so there was a lot of drama. On top of that, their CEO, well, the ex-CEO now, was a bit of a lunatic. And he was one of those guys who was just selling the story to investors and selling this vision of being this global company. But on the other side, he was doing shady things like moving leases from his own personal name into WeWork.
Oh, right.
Or things like he had bought the trademark for the We company, and then he had sold it to his own company for like $6 million or something silly.
Right.
So like shady things like that. And so the board kind of came together and they said, cool, this guy is a harm to the company because, number one, he's nuts. If you listen to any of his press conferences, he's he kind of feels like a hippie in a way.
Right.
And he talks about consciousness a lot, and he doesn't really feel like your CEO that you want to put trust in for a large multinational company. Yeah. So the board kind of said, cool, we're going to kick this guy out so we can put someone else in place. But the problem is that their whole valuation dropped by up to 70%, right? So they were at something crazy like $80 billion, and it's come way down because the per unit economics of these buildings doesn't really make sense. As a result, SoftBank, which is a huge Japanese investment arm from the Japanese bank itself, they put in billions and billions of dollars in the beginning rounds, and so they are the major shareholder, and they've got the most to lose if WeWork goes belly up.
Yep.
And so what they had to do was they had to come in, I think they injected something like 7 or 8 billion US dollars into the company to try and keep it alive, to try and make sure that things happen and this IPO actually happens eventually. So I just thought it was an interesting discussion talking about how, like, I for long thought there's been too much money in Silicon Valley and a lot of silly ideas are getting funded crazily, and people don't seem to care about profit. All they care about is growth. And this is an example of when that potentially could go wrong. And a giant company is not making any profits, is losing money at a scary rate, and investors keep throwing money at them. So Chad, I don't know what you think about that as an economic business model.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, in terms of its business model, as you say, I mean, it seems like a fairly simple thing. They essentially lease out big buildings and sublet them to corporates and individuals. So, make them accessible to people who, I'd say quite big in the sort of startup space and, businesses that are still building in terms of getting that flexible office space. But 100%, when I first saw this story, I was quite shocked as you said, they were kind of gearing up to list. Everything was going well, and all of a sudden, now that those skeletons are coming out of the closet, what went wrong? And I think the most concerning here is that 4,500 employees are currently at risk of losing their jobs.
Yeah, it's really a crazy story. It's hard to believe that it's real. It feels like a novel. It feels like Theranos all over again with Elizabeth Holmes and the chaos that happened behind the scenes at that company. And what was really interesting for me was that when I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, I had a lot of discussions with people in New York because this is seen as one of New York's biggest success stories. Like when you think tech startups, everything happens in Silicon Valley, and New York is trying to challenge Silicon Valley as an ecosystem. And this was one of New York's like pride jewels. And so when I was chatting to a lot of people in New York, they were expressing their disappointments and kind of their angst about it. Because, as you say, this company should exist, right? The idea is solid, right?
Yep,
and
100%.
it needs to exist, and it will exist. And WeWork in the best possible position to make it happen because of their brand strength, because of their investment, and because of their scale around the world. And so I kind of think that this is going to blow over, and they're going to figure out a way to make it profitable and make it work, because in my mind I don't understand how it couldn't work. But at the same time, it's crazy that one CEO's decisions or one person's decisions could put this giant thing at risk, which has huge implications across the whole of the world.
Yep, 100%. And in terms of SoftBank, I mean, I saw they're kind of now knocking on the door of Mizuho, which is another big Japanese bank, as you say, asking for more funds. And the question is here, as you say, if they inject enough capital in, now that they've stripped out the rotten apple, is there actually a solid business model there and good quality tenants currently in these buildings? I mean, I definitely know in London we've got loads. You say there's 2 in South Africa. I haven't actually counted the number of WeWork buildings that I've seen so far. So definitely on the side of the planet, and of course, as you say, the US and sort of the rest of the world, a really big company that's grown really quickly, and I think it's a very big concern if this is close to the end for them.
No, without a doubt. And actually, when I was in New York, we met with WeWork itself, and they claimed, I'm not sure how true this is, but they claimed that they are the second biggest property owner in New York.
Wow.
And that sounds crazy, but at the same time, they've got hundreds of locations there, and maybe it's true. I mean, they wouldn't have said it if they couldn't fact check it. So, it's a huge organization. I mean, when I was thinking about it, when we were I was at the WeWork here in Johannesburg a couple of days ago, and we had a chance to meet with the GM of WeWork South Africa. And he was talking about how the Rosebank building they've just built here, they opened it to the market, and they were looking for, I think, to fill 2,000 desks, and they were sold out in the matter of weeks. Right. So the demand is crazy. And so surely if you're selling out in a matter of weeks, you must be doing it at an economic model where you make money, right? Yep. So I think it has to exist. Whether it's going to be WeWork or it's going to be some other company that takes the reins, I don't know. But the fact that it can be burning from the inside as such a strong company ready to IPO just kind of puts Silicon Valley into perspective, and this whole growth at any cost mindset, which I think is quite dangerous. I think we've kind of forgotten what it looks like to build a profitable business from day one, right? Yep. Kind of how people think about startups these days is we're going to grow to X amount of users, we're going to get as much growth as possible, and then we're going to turn on profitability down the line. Yep. A lot of people are forgetting about the fact you actually can build a business, and I would argue should build a business by having a profitable business model from day one. And it doesn't sound crazy. It sounds like common sense, but when you look in the market, you don't see it.
100%. I think organic growth is always kind of the most sustainable and most kind of risk averse way of doing it. So I completely agree there. Across the